You have all seen this page multiple times, but just for the last time, please use the chat. If you have any questions, use the Q&A if you have any pressing questions, and which we will monitor, and closed captioning is still available. We will post a recording of this closing session as well to the Summit website. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about what we have accomplished. And I wanted to first and foremost express appreciation again to our wonderful presenters and the REL AP team who has put their heart and soul into this event. Thank you to our esteemed panel, Tiffany Beeson, Tammy Cozy-Konate, and Yasmina Luxinger, for opening up our minds in discussion about how to engage families, students, and educators in equitable ways to support comprehensive approaches to address all forms of trauma. Thank you to our facilitators of the working sessions, where we could roll up our sleeves and examine the suggested strategies in the action agenda, revise and refine them with fresh ideas, and develop our own concrete action steps to take in our local communities. Much appreciation to Carrie Friedman, Jenna Rush, Shai Fushman, and Michelle Woodbridge. Thank you again to our resident guru, Victoria Schaefer, for modeling effective self-care and providing us an opportunity to take a breath, relax, be mindful, and carry on this important work. Thank you to IES for supporting the work of this collaborative and this summit. In the last 2 days, we've accomplished great things. We celebrated the work of CSOC and introduced the action agenda. We shared information about comprehensive evidence-based approaches to address student and educator trauma. And we explored concrete actionable resources to guide your work locally and the work of the field nationally. We hope we encouraged and invited each of you to commit to action, collaboration, and using evidence to address trauma. Over the course of the 2-day summit, we had over 200 participants, and each of you has focused on a particular strategy included in the action agenda. During those sessions, you created individualized action plans to guide your next steps towards completing these actions. Throughout the summit, we asked you to record your aha moments using our Jamboards. Here's what some of you had to say in these sessions, as well as on the Jamboard.
I think that's my cue, isn't it, Hannah?
Yes, it is.
I had the pleasure of working with a great group that was very much invested in Strategy 1, and this is about implementing practices and programs that address student and educator trauma and evaluating the implementation and outcomes. And we decided to really focus on the implementation and dissemination of evidence-based practices as our first priority step, to spread the word about feasible, practical, and impactful programs and practices that we knew about. But we really just modeled what Joe was just talking about and really conducted a needs assessment, thinking about all the pieces that we had and some of the gaps and challenges we all experienced. So we started by acknowledging the many challenges we face, that the families we work with suffer from a lack of even basic needs like transportation and nutrition. Some lack homes, are homeless. There's drug use in our neighborhoods and in our families. And we also have limited school funding compared to some larger, more populated or less rural areas. We tried to quickly shift and pivot that focus to strengths, though, in a recognition that it really does take a village to provide comprehensive services and supports for students and staff. So I just really wanted to share and focus on those strengths that were recognized in the group as part of the team, and the resources our educators and our mental health practitioners and community members shared during this session. So you can see that some folks out there accessibility to mental health supports for students. They have partnerships with the local mental and behavioral health agencies. They also are well staffed with school social workers and counselors, and that the social workers often have to fill the gaps in many areas. They even use various forms of student data and can access that to monitor the services and supports and the impact of those programs. And others also have the benefit of local coaches who provide that one-on-one support to a very diverse staff. They can think about the range of people. They try to think about the range of people that can support students from the time they step on the bus to the time they go home, and sometimes even beyond. So these are folks that are really thinking about how to provide wraparound services to support kids, families, and the staff on campuses. Audience members really shared some promising evidence-based practices to increase communication and partnerships among all of our stakeholder groups. So some shared how they explicitly discuss needs and strengths with educators and family members. They do this every day or at least every year. You know, it's something that they put on their schedules and on their calendars and make sure that they talk to teachers, they talk to researchers, they share information about what are real needs on the ground and how can we work together to support each other. And while the CSOC resources that we've shared throughout their summit point to some school-based programs and practices, some stakeholders are really great in this group about suggesting other evidence-based programs that come from the court and substance abuse treatment systems. They provide services and basic needs in a really supportive activity-based context that gives families an opportunity to sit down and share a meal together, make some social connections, and have some mentors available in those connections that they make. So I really appreciated our groups modeling these needs assessment and resource planning activities. So thank you all for joining me in Strategy 1. And I hope it's really helpful to think about these small and large steps we can all take to add to our own toolkits to take action on both short and long-term planning, as Joe just so inspired us to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And now Shai will talk about Strategy 2.
Sure, we also had a great conversation. Our conversation focused on Strategy 2, which focused on how to create a well-coordinated and data-informed system of support for students and educators experiencing trauma. So not only taking the individual programs and practices, but really creating one comprehensive coordinated system so that students are supported throughout the day. Students and educators are supported throughout the day. In terms of the specific honey priorities, we talked about the importance of using data in order to inform what are the components of the well-coordinated system that is needed. So for example, how to use data to make sure that you have what we call the Tier 1 universal social emotional learning programs, identifying what are the strengths and gaps of the students in the community. We also talked about using data to identify students and monitor who need additional supports, and how to use data to monitor their progress to make sure that the more individualized or small group-based interventions are actually working and students are making progress in building those skills and reducing the negative impact of trauma. And then we also talked a lot about the importance of making sure the programs and practices are selected and implemented in a way that meets both individual student and teacher needs, but also that are based on that are addressing the cultural context and are that fit into the culture, the cultural context, the community context, including addressing any kind of deep-rooted drivers of trauma, such as racism. The third high priority need under this strategy was the one that we ended up selecting to focus on, and this is the one that we really dug deep into, which is how to make sure that besides having the data and having the right programs and practices, that individuals, everyone in the school building, from teachers to mental health providers, to the bus drivers, to the librarians, that everyone understands what is their role and what are their responsibilities to support all students and colleagues who are impacted by trauma. And so we had a conversation about what are some of the strengths and challenges that people are seeing in their schools and in their communities, in ensuring that the roles and responsibilities are clearly articulated and defined, and that people are really working together to create one cohesive system. So here are some of the things that the main takeaways that we had from that conversation. First of all, it's important to have these clear roles and responsibilities. That everyone understands what is their role in creating a cohesive system of supports. So it doesn't mean that every single person in the building has to be a mental health expert, but it does mean that each person has a role to play. Maybe it's simply to understand what are some of the symptoms of trauma or potential symptoms of trauma, those red flags, in order to identify and refer a student to, or a colleague to support. And again, that's an important role for everyone to have, whether you're a teacher or a support staff. And then we also talked about the importance of knowing what are the resources that are offered by community-based partners. We actually had someone who is a community-based partner who provides trainings and support to schools so that they can better understand to clarify those roles and responsibilities. Someone else, actually the same person, mentioned NAMI, the National, I think it's Association for Mental Illness, which is a national organization, but with chapters in every single state in many communities, and NAMI being a great organization to support schools and again, helping develop this comprehensive system, including training staff to understand what is their role and responsibilities. And this is all obviously based on the idea that collaboration is key, that when we collaborate, when we work together, not only within the school building, but also with our community partners, we can all be more successful. And lastly, we also had a conversation about how to engage staff in conversations about what are their roles and responsibilities, how to use professional development workshops or staff meetings to talk about, what do you see your role in supporting students and colleagues who've experienced trauma? How do you, what is your ideal role? What do you want to be doing more of it? What are the barriers? How can we help you be better at the role that you want to play in creating this system? So those were the three main takeaways from our session.
Thank you, Shai. And Jenna will discuss the key takeaways from strategy 3.
Thanks, Hannah. Both of those strategies sound like some very great conversations are happening in those sessions. And in mine, we talked about strategy 3, build the capacity of school staff to implement trauma-informed practices and programs. And similar to the other sessions, we heard a lot of strengths of what is happening in schools and communities right now, and also heard about a lot of challenges. A few very common themes came up, and you'll see those reflected in the bubbles on the screen. But one thing that we talked a lot about is around how training teachers to engage in self-care and to cope with their own secondary traumatic stress can really help them better become supporters of students impacted by trauma. One of the attendees shared the saying, "You can't pour from an empty cup." And I've definitely heard a lot of educators talk about that recently in the past year or so. We also heard from a lot of our attendees that teacher turnover is a really big challenge this year. And we talked about different strategies to ensure that teachers feel valued and appreciated. So in addition to self-care strategies, what are ways that you can make teachers feel seen and valued in the work that they're doing? We also had a nice conversation around bringing in families to increase involvement in the school and trauma-informed practices and policies, and in staff capacity building. Many of our attendees in the group emphasized the importance of really involving family voice, involving student voice, and involving community voice. And then finally, we talked about building buy-in, and that you need to build buy-in for trauma-informed practices, for staff professional development throughout the school year, both at the beginning and again throughout the school year, and really embedded into all the work that you do. Some of the attendees talked about the challenges that they have in building buy-in, but recognize that really having that from school staff and from leaders is imperative to this work.
Thank you, Jenna. And last but not least, the fourth strategy, Carrie will discuss some key takeaways from that session.
All right, thanks, Hannah. So our fourth action strategy focuses on engaging partners in addressing student and educator trauma. And our group discussed the high priority needs that were associated with this strategy, which are partnerships to bring trauma expertise and services into schools, and empowerment of families to share their voices and engage in trauma-informed practices and programs. And everyone in our group really thought that these needs rung true in their communities. So we discussed some of our strengths in addressing these needs and some of the challenges. And so just a few key takeaways from that conversation. The first was around considering the language we use, which I think has come up several times at the summit around trauma and trauma-informed, and who may and may not see themselves in these terms. So thinking about how to create a shared understanding and language around this work that is going to work for your context in your community. Another key takeaway was around considering the assets of families and communities, what they bring to the table, and really leveraging those with a strengths-based approach. There were many of us that were interested in doing this, but I think there was also a sense of needing a little bit more in terms of resources and support in really figuring out how to do this well. Another takeaway for our action agenda was related to really emphasizing that partners' support should be bidirectional. So when you form partnerships or bring in partners to your school, all of the partners should benefit from this collaboration. So really thinking about how to develop those partnerships that are mutually beneficial and strong and can supplement but not supplant school-based services. And then the last key takeaway that I wanted to share was just about a note about the value and strategies for partnering and bringing that to pre-service teachers. So something that can be promoted in preparing teachers for the classroom, really helping to set them up for success in doing the important work of partnering with other service providers and engaging families. So not to forget that in terms of training for educators before they enter the classroom.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you all for those takeaways from the strategy sessions. Now, Nancy will leave us with a closing message for the summit.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us throughout the summit. I'm having a little trouble putting my video back on, but I'll just get started. So just wanted to share that we talked about a lot during these past 2 days, but we know that the work must continue. We've heard loud and strong from you as participants and from our presenters that we must act with urgency, determination, and compassion. We have to work together using evidence-based practices to continue to mitigate the harmful effects of the opioid epidemic, coupled with the pandemic and other forms of trauma, including collective racial trauma. These layered traumas have lasting and profound impacts both on children and on the programs and educators that serve them. And due to these systemic inequities, these consequences are not equally shared. Children from families with low incomes, children of color, and dual language learners bear more of the brunt of these crises and receive fewer investments and supports in response than their peers do. But there's hope, and there are data and evidence-based solutions that offer policymakers, educators, and families with promising solutions and remedies to help themselves and their students to heal, cope, and thrive. Our presenters and you all yourselves have offered many compelling ideas in the sessions with your aha moments on the Jamboard and your comments in the chat. You've networked with new colleagues, you've offered solutions in the face of challenges, and you've shared ideas and promising practices. You leave these 2 days with an action agenda to continue your work tomorrow and in the months and years to come. So please commit to forming the necessary partnerships you need to do this work in a coordinated and collaborative way, to holding yourselves and your partners accountable to your objectives, and to implementing evidence-based, comprehensive solutions to support students and educators. We can do this, and we will do this. Before we close, I just wanted to reiterate that we're able to provide you with this no-cost professional development because we're funded by the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education. And as a condition of that funding, we collect feedback on the quality of training and coaching that we provide, such as this summit. So we want you all to provide honest feedback. We'll be sending out this link after the session, and I'm also putting it in the chat right now. Should take no more than 5 minutes, but it's a great way for you all to convey to us what we might be able to do better for future trainings, and also to signal your support for the program to our funders and communicate the value of the services we provide. So again, please take a few minutes to provide your responses. The link is in the chat, and I'll also be sending an email out after this session. So as we're about to wrap up the summit, please feel free to have that link open and take 5 minutes to take the survey. So I want to thank again our CSOC members and our REL AP staff. You're the best of colleagues and collaborators. And thank you again to the Institute of Education Sciences for supporting the collaborative, this summit, and our team throughout our work on this project. Thank you, Deborah Jonas, our fearless leader and director of REL AP, and to Yunsu Park, the partnership lead. Your support and inspiration really brought this partnership to life. Thank you again to our team of Carrie Friedman, Hannah Cheever, Shaq Sman, Tracy Desovich, Jenna Rush, and Michelle Woodbridge for tireless planning, great ideas, and holding every minute of this summit. And a heartfelt thank you to all of our presenters and to all of you for joining us these last 2 days. Please return to the website for more information and resources. We offer certificates of completion. If you would like to request one, please reach out to our email with your first and last name and which sessions you attended. And please reach out if you have any questions or interest in collaborating, and tweet about your experiences using the hashtag Trauma Support Summit. So have a great evening, take care of yourselves and each other, and continue to stay trauma informed. Thank you all.